Welcome back, everybody, to the Renaissance Humanism podcast and audio podcast. In today's episode, I will be discussing the Red Pill movement and a counter revolution to the sexual revolution of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. The Red Pill movement or Red Pill community comes from a countercultural to the sexual revolution, and it comes from pickup artistry communities from the 1990s and 2000, and a counterculture to the impact of modern technology, liberal economics, and how society has been governed by a set of social norms since the 1960s. Red pillars have many different forms and objectives that they wish to achieve, like Jordan Peterson, the author of the 12 More Rules for Life, and the author Louise Perry, who wrote the book The Case Against the Sexual Revolution, favouring a return to a traditional social norm and religious living, but not necessarily the belief in God. That's what Jordan Peterson and Louise Perry advocate from. Not necessarily the belief in God, but the religious lifestyle, particularly from the Christian religion or the Abrahamic religions. The Abrahamic religions are the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and its many, many branches, and the branches of Islam. The two main branches being Sunni Islam and Shiite Islamism. Uh, I do apologise if I got the wording for that wrong, because I'm not too sure how to pronounce the word Shiite. So my apologies for any viewers out there of an Islamic persuasion. Red Pill is not a united community, not a united political movement. It is merely a collection of political philosophies mixed with economic and social policies that differ from people such as Rollo Tomassi, aka George W. Miller, that's his real name, who is the author of the Rational Male series of books. And that's where the Red Pill community, where the Red Pill main predominantly comes from, his book series. In his books, he put forward the idea of people taking a red pill. This is where they understand the truth about society, about women, or keeping in the dark by taking the blue pill. For those people wondering, Rillo Tomasi got this analogy from the movies, the trilogy of movies, The Matrix. And another fun fact that the Tchaikovskys, who are now identified as trans women, red pills in the 1990s were traditionally for uh, males to females transitioners who took estrogen, and the estrogen pills at that time came in red capsules. So you might find that a bit humorous. The other actors uh, who also engage in the red pill community are people trying to monetize the loneliness of men, such as the Fresh and Fit podcast, the Whatever cast, and the Andrew Tates of the world. Use real social issues to generate revenue and prey upon the weaknesses of young men in their teens and 20s, and which is helping to contribute to the rise of incel culture throughout the English speaking world. Um, The sexual revolution happened throughout the 1950s to 1970s, which also overlapped with the Silicon Age starting in the 1970s. These two revolutions in technology and sexuality are strongly interconnected due to both being responsible for the rise of the red pill counterculture. Undeniably, the sexual revolution was ultimately a positive benefit for women. It freed them from the burden of child rearing due to the invention of the contraceptive pill in May 1950 and went mainstream in the 1960s, with the pill initially only being intended for wives of married men. That was in heterosexual relationships. Because keep in mind, this was the 1950s and 1960s. Women finally have sexual freedom. They also can enter the workforce uh, en masse and provided for themselves financially. This is a benefit because they were not tied down to dependency upon men. The consequences of that, according to Thomas Sowell, the economist and social thinker, is that any kind of solution, they are trade offs. This is Thomas Sowell quoting not exactly on this particular issue, on any kind of social or economic issue, because he's predominantly a economist, social thinker, uh, mostly dedicated to politics within the United States of America. So they are trade offs. Anything good or anything bad, they are trade-offs. Nothing is wholly good or wholly evil when it comes to any kind of economic policy, social policy. They are consequences. And for the contraceptive pill, I would say overall, they are positives. Overall, it was a good thing, but they are negatives. There's always a few negatives. And the problem with understanding this in the political culture, if you say anything negative about women's liberation, it gets twisted to something of that person being against the prosperity and women's education, which is not my intention at all. Just pointing out that they are negatives. For example, if I ate nothing but McDonald's, it would taste really good, but I would end up with diarrhea, or I would end up being overweight and having to be lifted out of my bedroom in a crane. That is just a negative. And there's positives. It tastes nice. Negatives. Can't see below the waist. So that's something to begin. Just for the audio listeners, I'm not like Bill from Blade. I'm not like that kind of weight size. That's why I make that a bit clear. I'm just using that as an analogy. I'm not. You're not listening to Jabba the Hutt on radio. Okay, back to the name topic now. Trade-offs will be discussed throughout this podcast. But overall, there were more positives for women than negatives. The consequences for men were that they were not prepared for the consequences of this new social environment. In the past, the only thing a man needed to do to secure a wife was hold down a job, which made them unprepared for women having their financial agency and prepared to develop tools of self-improvement. It's not something that most men were prepared to do, particularly people that are on the lower income scale, particularly with more jobs for going working in offices, no longer working in factories, and just how the work environment has changed through the technological revolutions over the past 50 years or more. It is the inability to adapt to the consequences of sexual evolution that is leading to the rise of involuntary celibacy in men, with the creation of new technologies which are making men more docile, hooked on games and pornography. Gaming is so damaging to the male drive to improve because it gives the mind the illusion that they are successful and provides a dopamine hit on the illusion that they are winning at life. Because the way games are designed to be addictive, because the way games they work, they do a lot of user experience design. So that's why you play like a game. It also makes slot machine sounds as well. It does that to actually keep the viewer engaged by making up the sounds, making lots of images, shooting sounds. And that's how it keeps them engaged. So in contrast, instead of playing live, they're just playing computer games. So that's the big takeaway. Furthermore, what the red pill community gets right is that males have a higher sex drive than women and desire to spread the seed and have access to unlimited sexual partners. That's the negative of pornography because it gives that to men. Because men higher sex drive, if they don't have access to pornography, that sexual energy would actually going to improve themselves, gain a more higher paying job, hitting the GYM, going out for a run, and stop using their right hands to pleasure themselves, self-pleasure. That's the massive danger. Pornography for men, and also gaming as well, because they're using all the energy, all that creativity, rather than on life, they're using it on issues and things that don't make any difference. The issue with pornography, and particularly with males, and also particularly with Generation Z as well, born between 1997 and 2010, that it makes it even more risk averse. The older generation is easily accessible to pornography, and it's also an easy cop out for that generation because they've grown up with social media and these new technologies. Modern technology does not just affect men, it also affects women, with social media platforms being a means for micro cheating. This is where a woman seeks attention and validation by using social media to gain love and affection. Men also do this through pornography and other sexual imagery or contact to women, in contrast to women who cheat emotionally, men cheat sexually. The problem with using social media to boost self-esteem is that it damages the relationship. Because if somebody gives free love and affection, the actual worth of that love and affection in real life decreases. It decreases the attraction. If you give somebody everything that they want, or they constantly get positive feedback, that feedback over time becomes meaningless. That's why there's a case with some women, because they look at the images all the time, can no longer perform sexually without a mirror, because they go look at themselves and feed their own ego constantly. That can be an issue with models as well. What is also add to this issue for men and women is that dating apps and social media give the illusion of unlimited romantic and sexual opportunities, which is inaccurate, it's false. Human beings understand the world visually, we understand the world by what we see and what we actually take in. And because we're online, we're not designed to have that many connections or perceive that many connections. That means we're being fed an illusion with Tinder and other matching online dating sites. It gives the illusion because you've got to take into account of distance, location, and also there's only so many time you can actually spend to date someone, actually get to know them. And let's say a date could take anything to begin a true relationship, anything between 3 to 6 months. So that's time constantly ticking on and missed opportunities, and that people are not settling down for what actually is available to them. But that's to everybody's individual life choices. Now I will be focusing on primarily on Jordan Peterson and Louise Perry for this part of the podcast. Jordan Peterson is a Canadian academic, author, and podcaster who shot to fame in his opposition to Bill C-16 and about adding the words gender identity or expression. He was also opposing the Human Rights Act to be added to this legislation, part of Bill 16, including age, race, sex, religion, and disability. They will also be added to the legislation. Jordan Peterson argued that children and teenagers should not make these decisions at such a young age, and that becoming an adult is hard. And he stated, "Do you really want to be able to choose your own sex at such a young age?" The way that Jordan Peterson is related to the red pill community and its counterculture is that Peterson's dominant audience on YouTube is predominantly male, the platform itself being mainly male orientated, male viewership. Just how the numbers work on YouTube. This was added to Jordan Peterson's online content as well. We targeted male self improvement, and that's male must learn how to live to be with a woman. They must learn to self improvement. They must learn how to improve their own human condition. Jordan Peterson also made controversial comments such as that it would be beneficial if every man had access to a woman regarding sexual and personal relationships to motivate the men into action. He also recently made a critical move to join the American Independent Media Organization that is on the right wing of American politics. The religious light of American politics is far more religious than the secular politics inside of Canada, inside of England, and inside of Australia. The Daily Wire is a right wing organization on the American right. It's also a very religious organization as well, which puts off more secular viewership of Jordan Peterson. Uh, Jordan Peterson's content has also become remarkably more religious since joining Daily Wire in 2022. And again, as I said before, this alienates secular liberals. It's also promoting more of a religious lifestyle as well, with the emphasis on the traditional nuclear family. By the way, the traditional nuclear family is very something recent. It's something from the early 20th century when people moved away from more communal living in the 19th century, less family orientated. Because the nuclear family is not actually traditional, because in the past, women were actually raise their children with their grandparents, with other women folk within the family. This can be the wives of their husbands or, uh, or other family members, would all help to raise the children communally, side of collective. This is not in the communist sense. This is in the sense of people living more as community-orientated society within the actual more tight together family groups, not being atomized like it is today. Because now, if people raise their children, most they might be the grandparents, the mother, the father, and just a child. That's not how things were done traditionally. So he's opting for a return to the more 1950s style of family environment. Now, we can look at the author Louise Perry. She's the author of the book, in case you've heard before, The Case Against the Sexual Revolution. Like Jordan Peterson, she is against female promiscuity, where women have many sexual partners with multiple men throughout their lifetimes. Mrs. Perry, like Jordan Peterson, is in favour of the traditional nuclear family and marriage for women, and men to marry in their early 20s rather than the norm, which is late 20s, early 30s in the English speaking world. Peterson and Perry represent more of the intellectual side of the red pill movement and the counterculture, with the hopeful return to their more sexual norms of previous decades. and to roll back the sexual revolution in terms of promiscuity. Louise Perry, in addition to creating uh, the link between the decline in global demographics as well to the actual phenomenon as well, because she links the decline of global birth rates, particularly in the West and in other developed nations in the world, also linked to liberalism, linked to this count and to the culture, the sexual evolution in the 1960s. Louise Perry also makes the argument that motherhood and liberalism cannot work together in their purest form. Liberalism is all about the individual and being atomized. This is basically being on your own. And in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, maybe even your 50s, that can be a positive for individuals to pursue their careers, to pursue other goals. And that can be great. But the problem is when people hit the 60s, 70s, when you start having health problems, starting arthritis, your friendships groups that in those age group they are going to suffer from other illnesses themselves, and it's very unlikely that friends will actually wipe their other friends' asses when they start getting ill. Because I myself, both my grandfathers, they're getting old, and they have trouble using the toilet themselves, and that's just something that's perfectly normal, and it's something that does happen when you get older. And having your family there, having your daughters, having your sons, having people that actually care about you, looking after you, giving time with you, that can mean a lot, especially when you start becoming more infirm and your mind starts going or your body starts going, you require additional care. And people not having children, not having that security blanket as they get older. Also, Louise Perry makes the argument that social welfare won't be there in Canada, won't be there in Australia, won't be there in the United Kingdom or Australia because there won't be enough people, enough young people to actually pay into the system to keep the actual system working, to keep people able to retire as well. Because in order for people to retire, there needs to be more young people and old people inside the economic system. And if that's not the case, that means people won't be able to retire. And retirement is very much something born out of the 20th century. In the past, you would just work until you died. So retirement is very much a modern concept. Now we'll be discussing the Andrew Tates of the world. Andrew Tate made his financial wealth by creating OnlyFans account by using young and attractive women to generate financial revenue from female beauty and young men looking for the illusion of romantic relationships. The OnlyFans platform does not work as a standard pornographic website. It works as something much more profound that targets the human psychological need for emotional intimacy. Intimacy does not come through sexuality, only through the belief that person is being seen, heard, and felt. This is the genius of Andrew Tate and people who use the OnlyFans platform. They're not selling sexuality, they are in fact monetizing the human need for connection, because in the common culture, people believe mere intercourse will lead to intimacy. It is a myth. People believe that intimacy is developed through sexual intercourse. The way intimacy is actually developed is through communication. And what OnlyFans do is give lonely men the illusion of intimacy through communication with women on these platforms. So Andrew Tate, in terms of the Red Pill community and others like him, on the Whatever podcast, the Fresh and Fit podcast, and Roll to Mossy, worked out how to marketize and monetize male disenchantment in order to become wealthy. Because the way the OnlyFans platform works is that these women on those platforms can actually communicate with their fans either by phone call, by text, and that's given the emotional intimacy and that they feel like they're being heard. And that's part of the countercultural movement and the red pill movement together because they both focus on male improvement at its best, but also learning how to actually monetize male sadness due to feel like they're disconnected from the world. Okay, we're coming to the final part of this podcast now. I'll be discussing the sexual marketplace. Uh, these red pillars also respond to the changing dating environment as well, particularly women entering the workforce in the 1960s and 70s. And this is why pickup artistry started really kicking off in the 1990s and 2000. The pickup artists were men who discovered how to attract women by using the dark triad traits of Machiavellianism, narcissism, and false confidence that particularly worked on young women who do not know the difference between a competent man or one presenting the illusion of competency. It was this attitude of seeing women as a purely sex object men as part of these communities that contribute to a growing dissatisfaction between men and women when it comes to the dating environment, particularly in the Western world. These groups also like to use evolutionary psychology and what accurately their bastardized version of science to justify the way they treat women. They state that because women are sexually hypergamous, this is where women choose sexual partners based upon being competent, capable, and valuable to their societies, either financially or they are particularly high value men as well, which is objective. That means they can be part of their communities as well, because what a woman considers to be a high value man is subjective to each individual woman. In practical terms, this means a higher value man in reality is subjective. Again, it's subjective. And many in the Red Pill movement see this as a woman being too picky and they should lower their standards in order to have a mate more on their level. This is where people like John and Peterson say that men need to rise and become worthy of women. In contrast, people like Andrew Tate, Roll Massey argue that women need to lower their standards in men. They're saying they're not being realistic. Furthermore, they comment on women only want to bang the winners and that men in their 20s will not achieve any meaningful sexual relationship until they reach a six-figure salary in their 30s or 40s. Again, this is playing on men's fears of being lonely and that they're not worth anything, and that women are only after their wallets. Which again, it's a false, it's illusion. It's people that spend too much time online. As for women have the danger of pregnancy. So again, they've got to be very selective. They've got to be careful who they sleep with. There is the contraceptive pill, but that doesn't always work, and that's again why women are picky as well. So that's the introduction to the red pill movement. I hope you found this interesting. I just want to stress as well, I'm saying what the red pill movement stands for, not my own personal views. I just want to make that clear as well. I'm not affiliated with that movement. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast and please take care.